Hello, hello, welcome. Welcome to another Poetry Flash virtual reading. They said it couldn't be done, but we're doing it. I'm Joyce Jenkins. I'm director of Poetry Flash. And today we are very pleased to present Ramón García and Kevorkian. A few alerts. There are 2 book links in the chat box. One to purchase this amazing book, Kivera, Kevorkian's brand new work, and another to Foundlings Press to purchase, to pre-order Ramón Garcia's brand new chapbook that's coming out in December from Foundlings Press. So you'll be able to access both of those publishers and very easily order those wonderful books if you want to from the chat box. Now, remember to check out poetryflash.org for news and info, reviews, poems, and remember to sign up for our email announcements, either from the chat box or from poetryflash.org. And remember to vote. Here I have my sticker. I voted. So here to introduce our poets today, Richard Silberg, Associate Editor of Poetry Flash. Come on, Richard. Yeah.
Hello there, poetry fans. We've got another rich reading for you. We got something really good. We're going to have Ramón García and Kevorkian. Ramón will be reading first. Ramón is the author of 2 previous books, The Chronicles and Other Countries. And as Joyce told you, he's got a forthcoming chapbook. And I think these 2 readers, they relate in a complex way, which I'll try to stumble at. But Ramón's poetry is based around the being taken from a Michoacan Mexican childhood by his father at some time. I don't know, Ramón, at what age you were brought here, but his poetry seems to me full of, besides beautiful language, beautiful paradoxes. One of them being, it seems to me as though a forward-looking childhood and a backward-looking adulthood missed each other, leaving him exiled in what he calls the monumental flatness of Modesto. And there's so much beautiful stuff in his poetry, which I wish I could just quote, but one phrase that stuck out to me, he said, I'm in exile from the sanctuaries of ardent suffering. A beautiful phrase which is referring to, as he calls it, the slave poems, prayers taught by violence to the Mexican women of his childhood, who he says in a very interesting, to me, somewhat cryptic description, has been betrayed again and continue to be. He says in another place that poets are the capricious children of wounded parents. Another fascinating idea, which he may or may not want to comment on. There's a lot of depth in those phrases. So let me just be quiet now, and let's have a flutter of jazz hands for Ramón García.
Thank you, everyone. It's great to see a lot of lovely people in these Hollywood squares or whatever they are. Well, first of all, I just want to thank Poetry Flash, which I was telling Joyce I used to see in Santa Cruz, because I went to UC Santa Cruz in the late 80s, early 90s. And I just remember it sort of marked my education. So I want to thank Joyce and Richard for his lovely introduction and interpretation, and Molly for the technical assistance. And thank you all for coming, showing up today. I'm going to begin with a poem. It's kind of Wordsworthian in that it's a little bit longer than most of the other poems. Not too long, but it's not short like most of the other poems I'm going to read. And it's Wordsworthian because it's about the Modesto landscape that I grew up in that Richard mentioned. So it's about Modesto in the 1980s when I was growing up. So it's about a time and a place in the United States. The title is The 1980s or the Cold War. Modesto was a world, provincial but complete, a reduced world, and yet the country entire. An immigrant world, insistently Mexican, petrified by loss, and nostalgia that was not nostalgia, but the continuation of Mexico by other means, in another landscape. The whistle of the Pacific Railroad train, it returns in the complacent dark of the suburbs. Though the trains ceased operating many years now, its distant whistle continues, where childhood, its unimaginable future, is held in the pause of hope, trying to find an out. Thomas Downey High School is painted blue, but a different blue than I remember. Aaron Quinlan, the star football player, valedictorian and prom king, is dead. I saw him nude once in the locker rooms of the high school gym, a few seconds, like a vision, an awakened unease. He has joined the uncertain blue of those years. The teachers who looked at the Mexicans without seeing them, or with contempt. What lives of quiet desperation did they live? Their spirits have gone with the receding sound of the train. But it's possible that I'm entirely wrong, that in fact they were wife swappers or promiscuously happy or plainly indifferent, content citizens of a country that lacked nothing and wanted nothing more. They're mostly dead now too. And although we lived under the rule of the same post-Nixon Christian God, I've never thought of forgiving them because I've never understood the crime. And now it mostly doesn't matter if it ever did. These days, I notice another generation of Mexican adolescents. I see them in mini mall parking lots, bagging groceries in the supermarkets, playing soccer in the green-lawned parks. And I wonder, could I have been that beautiful too, in blazing San Joaquin Valley summer afternoons, at the center of an exquisite, terrible age? Nothing bothered to tell me so. Even mirrors were masters of distortion and a product of their time. I hope they know how beautiful they are. and that they are beautiful to each other, that truth can be redeemed or recovered somehow. If there is anything that can be salvaged from an era before the city grew and the Bay Area spilled into it, its defiance, the knowledge that distant wars and the years outgrew each other and moved apart. I recently finished a book manuscript, which most of the poems are based on the Bluebeard fairy tale. And I've written about fairy tales before, especially in my last book, The Chronicles. But Bluebeard, although I liked the fairy tale, I didn't know how to enter it. I just couldn't find a conceit and angle. It was just such an awful misogynist fairy tale. And then it occurred to me that it could be a kind of post-colonial story about revolution if the brides could come back as ghosts to kill Bluebeard. And he had a gay lover, and there was other things. So that really led me to a whole series of Bluebeard poems. And this poem is kind of the central poem that I've titled the manuscript, no, a book entitled Bluebeard's Gift. And this is the title poem, Bluebeard's Gift. Your key, instrument of death. Your key, a gift. Behind the final door, the blood murals of erasure, where phantom figures etched you to oblivion. I locked you in and turned the key forever on your rule. Your screams revived the harem terrors that you stifled, the furies of united horror. Cryptic room devoid of mirrors, gallery of imageless internment, wedded to the lowest rungs of abandonment. The brides became you, duplicated brides encircle you in prayerless eternity. This next poem is, I guess, a California poem, like the I think Richard sort of touched on that. But I wrote it in San Miguel de Allende a few years ago when I was spending the summer there, and I was thinking about I was thinking about the cows in when I went to stay with a friend of mine in Brittany in France, and I was fascinated by the cows because I'd never seen cows that looked so healthy and so beautiful. Having only seen them in Modesto from the freeway, a lot of my friends think I grew up around cows, but I grew up in the suburbs. Modesto is actually quite suburban. So I never really had seen cows up close, and I was just fascinated with them in Brittany. But I was thinking about them when I was in Mexico in San Miguel de Allende. Golden State. Here in San Miguel de Allende, where cows are not in sight, I remember the herded, corralled cows visible from car windows on the 99 freeway between Bakersfield and Fresno, imprisoned in stretches of stench, fields of overexploited industries. In Brittany, I saw cows that were content to roam the pastoral grounds of Parisians' vacation properties, their bovine eyes bright and alert, hides gleaming patches of well-being, every movement of their massiveness heavy with health, their near immobility a dance rooted to a stage-set countryside, nurturing their passage through pastures of idyllic years. Elsewhere, I recall the cows of my country, the animal negligence, the confinement of existence. Immigrant Oedipus. Enigma or the backwash of memory. I encounter again a Mexican life I'm familiar with, but a stranger to. In the sidewalks of the Centro in Morelia, all the handsome boys walking, cigarette in hand, recall photographs of my father in his youth, living at the crossroads of city streets he would never return to. His unexpended youth, a secret that stayed in place, a death of sorts between countries. Interrupted sun that distance occluded. I return again, but cannot find me. I went to Istanbul about 15 years ago, and in a thrift shop, I saw this photograph of a sinking ship that was named the Istanbul, and it haunted me for years. I always regretted not buying that photograph. And years later, I wrote this poem, and it was published last year in Plume. It's entitled Missed Romance. An old black and white photograph of a sinking ship, the Istanbul, in a thrift shop in Istanbul. It was cheap. The shop owner wanted $10 for it, but I didn't want to fit it in a suitcase already packed with stuff collected in European cities that summer. I think about that photograph now and then when thrift shops talk of Istanbul or stories of ships or sailors. Salvage that sinking image. An exotic, beautiful catastrophe that could have been mine. The next three poems are actually from the chapbook. The chapbook consists of poems about writers, poets and writers, and some pop stars like David Bowie and Juan Gabriel. But the first poem, it's a poem about Thomas Mann, the great German writer who lived in Los Angeles during the Second World War. And he was a member of the Unitarian Church where he spoke against the Nazis. He was very involved in like the anti-Nazi activities in Los Angeles. And he wrote to Dr. Faustus in the Palisades, in the Pacific Palisades. And he was also haunted, obviously, by his attraction for young boys. And in his journals, in his early journals, he describes his attraction to his son, his young son at the time, Klaus, who also was a writer, who committed suicide like many of his children and his own siblings. And so that's the context for the poem. It's entitled Thomas Mann in the Palisades. Afternoon walks, palm trees, the sea breeze coming in. Jacaranda, like ruby-colored waterfalls, dousing newly built walls. Apollonian sun, sensual and innocent sunset, Mediterranean. It brings back Tuscany, Egypt, Palestine. Thwarted aging Dionysus, the waiter a child of his pent-up lust. The young man's American eyes, they fall casually on the distinguished foreigner. Faust is the fatherland, incest and secrets. Crimes read between the pages of newsprint. The Jews. Cries for help cable in from Marseille, Vichy, Perpignan, Casablanca, Portugal. Seasonless warmth, the atonal breaking of the shore. And Hollywood, the celluloid new world, a short drive down Sunset. The Pacific, avocado groves, coastal mountains, hints of the tropics, Old Testament patriarchs, a biz, an allegory, a parody, the final truth. Long dinners, the emigre social scene, family life, the European mind transplanted continues, but the waiter and his smile, his eyes, the dangerous summoning of a father's lust for his son. I just have two more poems, or three. This one, as I mentioned, is from my upcoming chapbook, and it's about an artist that really doesn't need an introduction if you're Mexican or Latin American, because he's like a very famous singer, Juan Gabriel, who died just a few years ago. And he was very flamboyantly gay at a time when, this was not very common, and yet he was very accepted in Mexico. And I think the only other thing I need to contextualize is that he was born in Ciudad Juarez, which is today, the center of the worst femicide in the world. He was very prolific. He wrote like 1,500 songs that are sung by many singers. He was friends with the great actress Maria Felix, who he wrote a very famous song for. And he's just an amazing artist that I hadn't really thought about until he died, and I listened to his music. And he's really the equivalent in American kind of music to a Joni Mitchell or Bob Dylan. So in American press, when they compare him to Liberace, it's not a good comparison. He's very flamboyant, but he's actually a genius of just the way he changed the Mexican music. And it's really an amazing thing. And then I use a word that's from Mexican slang. I think it's Mexican, maybe it's Latin American, Spanish too, I'm not sure. Cursi just means cheesy or tacky. The poem's entitled Juan Gabriel Ascends to Heaven. Scaling the lyrics of an orphaned soul. Singing is a ladder, we are the steps, you will reach heaven. You remained the same on both sides of the border. Everything else changed, but your songs continued, untouched by the vicissitudes of alienation. Somehow you were always there in the blank spots of time. You were the one constant, irrefutable promise, a sad celebration, emotional carnival. On the radio, all those childhood Sundays before Mass, your innocent poetry of betrayal, love found and denied. College years, the apartment with the shag green carpet on Ocean Avenue in Santa Cruz will forever guard the 15-minute Bellas Artes concert version of Hasta que te conocí. Your voice, flooding speakers and gay bars in San Francisco, Los Angeles, Buenos Aires, Tijuana, San Diego, Mexico City. Another generation will dance, and another, until there is no trace of who we were. Only then will your voice disappear. You ascend the heights of national glory. O pure largesse, your angels, those androgynous sluts, await your arrival. Clouds big as air balloons are mariachis playing instruments of unworldly light. No one will judge you. God will not judge you. Catholic Mexico never judged you. God will restore your exalted Ciudad Juarez, the Ciudad Juarez that is not a graveyard. And you will again be the Juan Gabriel of the 1970s, the cute cacheton with the sensual Mexican lips and the sad eyes. We will be who we have always been, we will sing your songs. We forgive the bad acting and the forgettable movies, the sincerity of sentimentality. It was always about the music, about love, what we could or could not have, but felt and lived nonetheless. In those sublime hells of the heart, the high notes of torment. Lovelessness, distorted hearts, passion, tainted by your songs, plunged us into the kursi. But we couldn't stop. No, thank God we couldn't stop ourselves. Our Mexican lives, cauldrons of contradictions, nights of drunkenness and madness, your songs redeemed. You are carrying 1,500 songs to place at the feet of the Virgen de Guadalupe or Maria Felix. We will make joy of our suffering, your songs proclaim. Mariachi send us off when we die. In the meantime, our lives are encircled by the music of your angels. This last poem from the chapbook, as I mentioned, there are several poems there about Mexican, Latin American, German poets and writers, a lot about how they died. And this poem is about Alejandra Pizarnik and her suicide. She's an Argentinian poet who committed suicide in 1963, I believe. And she did it in a very theatrical way. She put lipstick on her dolls and then left a note. And it's just a very theatrical kind of suicide. And then her legend began. Now she's very well known. It's being translated a lot. Pizarnik. The final scene is feminine, shrewdly elaborate. Poe maudit at its pinnacle. It's the theater of death, the laboratory of fame. There you left the dolls with makeup on, the legendary note, silence and its masks. Assailing the farthest reaches of the night, you left darkness hanging, surrendered to the wonderlands of failed Alice's, a triumph. Then came the marketplace and kitsch, the folklore of the quotidian, murderers, the clandestine music of torture. I don't blame you, but I'm embarrassed to admit I believe you. Flowers costumed in blue in Buenos Aires, death still awaiting your arrival, mirrors bewitched by your absence, and your poems, dark adieus in all the cities. You permitted everything. I should mention that I wrote that poem in Spanish, and that's very new. I've only written in English until this year, so I have 4 poems in Spanish, 2 of them which will appear in the chapbook, which I'm very excited about to be able to write in Spanish. It's kind of a little unexpected. I'm going to finish with a short poem from my first book, Other Countries, that was published by What Books Press. And it's a poem about Rimbaud. It's entitled Rimbaud Departs. The shadows I make on Paris sidewalks run off without me. Fields, barricades, burning cities, sunflowers, Christ, sperm, the incense of religion. The night is not darkness enough. A remote continent awaits me beyond erotic experiments, mercantile martyrdoms, bourgeois slaveries. France, flowering with blood in cathedrals of reason, in prisons my senses. I am going elsewhere to be a violent child. And thank you.
There you go.
All right, Ramon, thank you so much. You write beautiful English, no question about that. Uh, our next reader will be Karen Kevorkian. Both of these poets zoom into us from down south. They both live in Los Angeles, and the, Karen's new book is Kivira, and I'll explain the title in a moment. They're utterly different books between what Karen has written and the poems that Ramon wrote. In a certain way, they complement each other in that this new book, Kivira, goes to the monumental flatness, to repeat Ramon's phrase of the United Southwest out of Mexico. It comes from there and in a certain way looks back. So I'm stretching, but they do complement each other. Now, Quivira refers to a city where gold was to be found. Francisco Vasquez de Coronado in the 1540s came out of Mexico into what is now the American Southwest, looking to repeat Hernan Cortez' big gold strike when he destroyed the Aztec Empire and ripped them off. And Quivira is one of the fabled seven cities of Cibola, and that was where the gold was supposed to be found. Apparently, she tells us there was nothing to be found but beans and maize in what is now Kansas. Now, I've been reading poetry a long time, and I'm always amazed and delighted to find a book that's really unlike any other book I've read. And Karen's book is unusual in that way. Now, when you buy this book and read it, which I hope you will do, you will see that the each poem is unpunctuated. It begins with a capital letter and basically runs in all small letters as if it were a long run-on sentence, but that's not what's happening. Actually, there's a layering of voices, an imbrication of all kinds of voices, some few of which she indicates in her notes. But there's beautiful language. I'm sure a lot of it is hers, and some of it perhaps is from other poets because there's a lot of quoting. And these voices, some of them refer back to the Genesis, some of them just refer to what we've got in America right now, to the landscape. There's all sorts of voices happening here. So it's fascinating, a fascinating form, a fascinating book. Let's give her a warm welcome. Let's zoom in on Karen Kevorkian.
Hi there. Thank you, Richard. I'm always, humbled to have anyone read and comment on the book as eloquently as you do. I want to thank you and thank Joyce both for fighting the good fight with Poetry Flash for such a long time. When I lived in the Bay Area, I came there after graduate school and I didn't know anybody. And your journal was vital in connecting me to a community of writers. It told me where there were readings. Richard's, your reviews of many of the Bay Area writers introduced me to the writing in the area. So my gratitude is immense. And a journal like that is a beacon for the poetry community. And God knows, as writers, we all need our communities, our literary communities. Ramón, thank you for reading with me. It's good to be on the same program with you. Ramón and I are going to do a what do you call it? A paired act with LA Review of Books next month. So check that out. He's supposedly interviewing me, but really he's just making me look good. So I also want to thank Andrea Watson, whose face I see here on the screen, the publisher of Three Taos Press. And she makes beautiful books, as you'll see from Kivira. And I'm so pleased to have my book published by this important small press. So thank you, Andrea. Richard, you pretty much covered what Kivira is, and thank you, because it's something I always have to explain. But I guess one of the things I can say is that there's a lot of the Southwestern landscape in this book, and you can think of it as many car trips back and forth across the Southwest, and driving and admiring the landscape. Inextricably, you're reminded of its past. And so the book is not so much about the events of the past. A couple of the poems, some of the poems are, it provides a context, and it's kind of, the name Kivira becomes a metaphor for longing. And it's a metaphor to which we give various names, among them wealth or religion or love. But it's not too much to say that this weight of the past, or this heaviness, is always with us. And even though we call it things like, we don't call it genocide so much, we call it disappointment, we call it failure, or we call it a sense of our own mortality. So this is the context of all these poems. Heaviness. I'm going to start by reading a poem called Half Unpacked Suitcase. It's appropriate to this idea of driving across the landscape. I am a fierce driver, making my miles, although 4 times sudden braking and pure luck saved me. Wrong turns onto rutted orange gravel on the edge of the gorge, a few feet away, a sheer river drop. The girl lay on the grass, head in the lap of a man drawing charcoal designs on her chin. The chin pricked in small, even rows with a sharp stick, the stick dipped in juice of a certain riverweed, then in the powder of blue stone found in low water. Fancied we were God's Israel, journeying to the promised land, The red rock, yellow ochre sweeps, tufts and spines, deviations of color. The mind like a desert, a wheel turning to dark night as it does. Feet's back and forth elegy, wailed formless words. I grew up in San Antonio, and a lot of images of the Virgin of Guadalupe were, well, they were just simply omnipresent. So in the Southwest, it's an image I turn to for its familiarity. Our Lady of Sorrows, or is it solitude? Each day contrives a new architecture of pillows, letters smoothed flat, bent photos, notes on yellow paper, whole years forgotten, not necessarily important ones. Smudge by the door, blue-clad figure hovering, from the corner nattering, a child who mumbles out of adult hearing, the voice always fictitious. Hissy sibilance, trees shushing, stubby pile of the almost velvet chair that looked smooth, prickles. 8:30 p.m., too little light. A cat leads the way to disappear in gloom just above the floor. Sensation of movement is what a ghost is. Worn sheets and all the feet shoved to the end. In the mind, synthesis. Thinking the day began well, when the magpie levitated through trees, acute black and white, delineating a breast small expanse, the sun burnishing faces at certain angles they could not refuse. Saying, then you also have the tattoos, and she slightly pulled down her sweater neck, pointing to a dot in her cleft, saying, there, that's one. Arranged shelves, a corner fireplace, beehive molded, kitchen gas heater on, turquoise Mexican oilcloth splaying loose-lipped yellow roses. It doesn't arrive just like that. The body surprised by each pendulum lunge. The mask dropping, the silver one, although it was heavy, gorgeous. The heater turned itself off. Orchestration of thumps, tings, tinny booming, shrill beauty, coyote or hound. And in the high desert, thinking of California. It does not pass, but lingers. Unaccustomed in this dry land to mud left by snow, the gray crust it leaves on hems of long pants, it's packing into shoe treads, reading more is coming. The air in California very bad now, finding remains from the fire. Corridors of fire-stripped tree trunks, husk of cars in lines on the roads, ash-sifted yellow air. What an idea, trying to outrun the fire. In a moment, on you. This next poem, it refers to the cave and familiar to literature and philosophy. news from the neighborhood of the cave. Spindly, long limbs of Chinese elms, their howdy-do of limp shadow nodding from the pavement, heat igniting her hair when she touched it. From the house, a cat declared itself strangled. Below lay a museum of layers geological so fragile, a bird's weightless landing could liquefy. Some did not turn faces toward sun, preferring the distorting world of the cave wall. Was she on fire? What was it about shadow? To this poem, I would only add the word vote. Kind of moving. Another California poem here. A Los Angeles poem. Explicit comments about the world, non-metaphorical. Santa Monica and San Gabrielinos backdrop the city she once called her Grand Quivira, where men strap on leaf blowers, yank cords hard, wave wands left and right in priestly benison. Fantasies of Spanish stucco and red tile nod to European slaughter over transsubstantive mysteries. Shifting cutlery of green palms. Hillside pump jacks that bow and rebow in dinosaur feasting, where someone waving arms at another means I am done. The laddered sidewalk, a cartography of a new mappa mundi. Acetylene rat-tats of crows whose feathers are not lustrous or secretive, but inarticulate as a black of old coffee. Beneath streets gridded logic, a river's liquid cursive of green silk across, around, returning. Red neon hand of the psychic life coach. Pendulum swing of a window blind cord, lapping in circles now. So evidently I was still somewhere. After 7 hours in bed, not always with closed eyes, it's 6 a.m. Lifting a hot cup, chewing an apple, daylight gleaming colorlessly on a car hood, a hamster's life you call purposeful. Photo of the aged Dura at her desk, a place I always thought to arrive. Now I am that, and time a pack of cards at my back. Riding in a car, someone opening the door saying, and, I replied, whatever it was, he wanted to hear it. So, here we have one more poem about a virgin. I have not only Guadalupe's, but I have a particular fondness for Annunciations. And as you know, they're the subject of many, many paintings. And this is a Flemish one. And I always wonder why the Virgin doesn't display a little attitude. I don't quite get it. Stark the hand on blue silk luster, not a dress you could wear for any event, a drapery, tablecloth, disguise. A cat or bench near the wall where red cloth puddles. The angel's motley wings angels often wear in these moments. Through the window, sitting on a wall, a peacock, dully. A few buildings, a riverbank, trees of toothpicky bark. If I knew what to say, she'd say, how to react. I am trying to love him, say something of myself. Oh, never mind what to do with this. Less us than his idea of us, a role hard to play. All dead now, all of them. The ones in the room, the ones waiting at home, someone else. Woman, I told my secrets to, secrets now safe. The skeptical marries, the angel importuning, its colored feathers that make banners of wings, not instruments of flight. Susurrus murmurs, fan like wings of green parrots that flew down from the juniper expectantly. Half turned, surprised by what has entered her small room, private from the look of it, always an open window and a book. The window usefully glimpsing a city to go to if you don't have to keep your angel date, the propositioning. Someone else's dream, an abstraction, that glory or duty, like most things, lead to the knife cuts, the bleeding, the very small room. The next, I'm going to read two more poems. The next one is a part of a very long section in the book called 21 Days. And it's a section that goes in it covers a lot of geographical territory, a lot of emotional territory, but it starts off with this poem about a pilgrimage, which seems to me pretty much what is the substance of this book. And but this is one that refers to the famous pilgrimage in Spain on El Camino to Santiago de Compostela. The pilgrim. Everything had been a lie, walking 1,100 miles to what? Upright truth standing on its head, trickster, gulling, 22 pounds on her back, choosing whether to eat or carry weight. Rising 3 a.m. to walk into milk of the Andromeda galaxy, old side-lying universe. Pointing to the east, she followed it. Compostela, a field of stars, drenched in them. What was the lie? Steps scattered with straw, replaced by gravel paths of old Roman roads. Pyrenees crossed in a rainstorm. Path, the mountain filled with fast rushing water. Deep mud each step, sucking down her shoes, a laughing sound. So, thank you for your being here. This last poem is in 3 parts. It's the title is Black Cloth Far Away Stays With Me. And the title is taken from a translation of a poem by the Spanish Civil War poet Miguel Hernández. I also used, the poem was entitled, one of the translations of it, there's a lot of translations out there, but one of the translations is, I go on in the dark full of light. So if you wanted to look at the poem itself up, that's what you would look for. Sigo en la sombra, lleno de luz. The epigraph is which ripens from nothing. So the poem is kind of one thing. Hernández died during the Civil War. He was in prison, the Spanish Civil War. And so this poem is kind of a meditation on death and I even include the bardo in the Tibetan Book of the Dead. So as usual, the poems kind of move around. People washed the body, stuck it, told it to open wide, to ease the pill down the dry throat. Sometimes necessary to turn from eyes, sometimes dust settling on shoulders of ornamental glass, not tall brown important bottles with white plastic caps, tilting toward a mirror's long silver shafts slant like rain. The body, almost no more, it drifted on opiate seas. It left the shore. What good was disappointment or relief, pale as long-stalked lilies, sickest sweetness? Eyelid edging the pillowy quilt, bunched so like a watchful dog, ready for, come here now. Low spread live oak leaves rattle, money in a cup. White wings teeter on power lines, soft music. Their call hesitates between first tones and last. A middle place lasting 7 days, though such long days, what absurdity. Are the leaves solid black? Gauze sky pushed into a room where TV bodies lie oddly angled on blooming red fire. Deafness within deafness, smoke in the night, fireflies sparking. What is rough? What is smooth? What are their names? Mind of the clear light. Miguel Hernandez, certain Pablo Neruda needed to hear the nightingale. In dark, climbed a tree, whistling. He is shown, mouth in a half grin, the jaw-binding band of cloth, teeth like a child. Nights, rats did not fear him. Days he lay in sun, one corner of the prison yard, a grave, he said, to rid him of loving. Thank you very much.
Okay, I'm going to bring Joyce back on, but I want to thank both these fine poets, Ramón, Karen. Thank you so much for joining us with your beautiful reading. Here's Joyce.
Just takes so long. I thank you so much for that wonderful reading. Just want to say really quickly, thanks to Richard Silberg, thanks to Molly. Thank you for your wonderful tech support. We couldn't do it without you. And check the chat box for book links to find the Three Taos Press book from Three Taos Press, Karen Kevorkian's new book, Quivera, and Ramón Garcia's Foundlings Press chapbook. You can pre-order it here. So thank you so much for joining us.